Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. We'll wait for 2-3 minutes and then we'll start again. Welcome back. Welcome back. Good afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We've reached till a certain point when the Portuguese had landed into India. And we have to now take that story forward. Avni, what we covered was generally the advent of Europeans, Mughal decline. That's it. That too, I'll repeat basic parts as a form of revision. You can always watch it at the end of the day. That should not be a problem generally. I'll repeat the part of the Portuguese so that you are up to date with me. And for some of you who are asking me about ethics, just want to say that certain changes were made in the year-long timetable way back. You have received an email about it also. Very, very old development it was, that basically this is the last batch of modern India before prelims. So it was important that this was done before prelims itself, and ethics has been shifted after prelims because that makes more sense there as it is a mains oriented topic. So there were certain changes which were made so that everybody who is basically now it's a very old development. There would be have been certain communications which would have been made to you, separate issue altogether. Ethics will be done after prelims. Right now we are doing modern because this needs to be done before the prelims examination. So I have asked the management. This is the communication which they gave to me, and basically this is not something new. You may have had the old 2024. Prelims 2024, after that you will get ethics. That makes more sense there. Right now we're doing this because this needs to be done here. So that is something which was already communicated. That's you and the management. I am just telling you what was told to me. So I want to resume back what we did in the first session. Now, and I think Sabir has been very kind enough to push in the updated year-long timetable also. He has pushed it as a form of a push notification. You can see that. So you please note the changes which have been done in that, but something very old development that was. Okay, now for the people who were with me and the people who weren't with me, what we've done since the morning is that we've discussed the rise of yeah, that is the point. That is the point, Aniket. That is why we did it, because if you were doing ethics and you joined just recently, it would have made no sense. All prelims oriented topics need to be done before prelims, and that is why we changed it. So perfect if it worked out for you better in that sense. Okay, now we have discussed previously. We've discussed previously 2 to 3 things. We discussed the syllabus, we discussed the books, and the basic conclusion was PPT plus the NCRT, new NCRT is a must. If needed, you can refer to Spectrum or Bipin Chandra or my book. That is totally your call. Thereafter, second, we discussed the Mughal decline and we tried to understand that how can one man be so instrumental in destroying an empire, and we tried to understand the systemic issues which were there vis-a-vis understanding a fiscal crisis, thereafter understanding how that led to a Jagirdari crisis, invasions, foreign what we call as weak successors, and an agrarian revolt, all compounding and leading to the decline of what we call as the Mughal empire. Then we did weak successors, and we did a very important acronym: Baja, Faramu, Ahaksha, and Akba. Now, if you are confident enough, can I check, do you remember the sequence? If just to refresh, Baja, Faramu al Shah Akbar. For anybody who joined us right now, this is basically the acronym for all the weak successors. From Bahadur Shah to Jandar Shah to Farooq Shah to Rafiul Darat to Muhammad Shah Rangila to what we call as Ahmad Shah, then Alamgir, Shah Alam, Akbar II and Bahadur Shah Zafar. So I'll just check your knowledge. Let's see if you can retain something done in the past 2 hours. I don't expect you to, but why not? I'm giving you a sequence of rulers. You have to put them in the right order. So you have Akbar 2, and Farooq Shah. Come on. Tell me the code for this. 3, 4, 2, 1. Very good. 3, 4, 2, 1. Bahadur Shah, Farooq Shah, 3, 4. How are you writing 3, 4? Baja for, yes, very good. 3, 4, 2, 1. 3, 4, 2, 1. Baja ka, Faramu, very good. And then Ba, which was the end. So now you get it how these things can actually help you in learning very quickly and you can retain also. Bahadur Shah, see, Jaswant, understand, when it says Bahadur Shah Zafar, it's the last one. If it only says Bahadur Shah, it means first one. So remember this point. Sir, but the elimination method is so scary and troubling. But Aditya, the point is, with the way examination is asking 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pair, as it is, elimination won't work. So you need to know very straightforward these things absolutely. So you need to have absolute knowledge in this rather than using elimination. If you've seen the recent pattern, I will show you the questions next week. You will see that the elimination method doesn't really work. Okay, now we thereafter discussed that why was there a need to cross over the what we call as the whole African continent, because of the fact that in this sector we had the Ottomans and the Safavids who were blocking the land route, and therefore there was a need to go around like this. And here we discussed that there was 1492 1488 rather 1488 1492 1498 and 1500 1501 1503 and 1505. So here this is the dates we basically discussed. 1488 is Diaz reaching this point. 1492 was Christopher Columbus going to the other side. 1498 was Vasco da Gama circumventing and reaching Calicut. This was basically because he had a Gujarati pilot, Majid Hussain. Thereafter, Abdul Majid. Thereafter, 1500 is Cabral reaching and fighting with the Zamorians. 1501 was Vasco da Gama again reaching, not having a good relationship. And 1503, 1505 was first factory in Cochin and second factory in Kannanur. So basically, this is the sequence. And I will give you a master timeline. These years are important. I will give you a master timeline. Don't have to worry about that. In Portuguese, the most number of dates are there in the Portuguese because the Portuguese were there for much longer time in India than anyone else. But I have to discuss that. So I'll give you the dates again just to refresh. So is everybody up to speed? And for the people who've joined, just understand that this is the basic thing we've done. Zamorians were very warm to Vasco da Gama first. Thereafter, Vasco da Gama was not were welcomed because Cabral has fought with the Calicut sector, with the Zamorians, and therefore that is the point where we stopped. And thereafter they moved north and south of Calicut in Kochi and Cannanore, and then were able to establish the first factories. So are we all up to speed? Yes. Zamorians, as I told, were the subsidiary kings or smaller rulers attached to the Vijayanagara Empire. Can I move forward, everybody? Okay. So 1498, 1500, 1501, 1503, 1505. Vasco da Gama comes, Cabral comes, Vasco da Gama comes again, but not welcomed in that sense. This is Cochin and this is Cannanore. This is Cannanore. Now understand this. Which is that the Portuguese, as soon as they got Cochin and Cannanore, now started to establish. This is advent of European. Advent will begin before Mughal rule began, not before, during Mughal rule. The Yeah, in a way, if you want to say that, the real European powers will only come after. Portuguese were there before even the Battle of Panipat had happened. Yes, that was yes. But the Dutch and all were very late. Only the Portuguese were the first. Advent of European Portuguese, yes, they were already there even before the first Battle of Panipat happened, as early as the Vijayanagara Empire. Okay, now the Portuguese between 1498, 1500 and 1505, they have now established two factories. Now, as soon as they established the factory, they also used to do one more thing, which is that they started to establish or send what are called governors to administer these factories and territories. And the first governor of the Portuguese to land in India was a person called Almeida. Francisco de Almeida. Almeida, I'll give you his whole name. 1 second. You have Francisco de Almeida as the first proper governor to come and become the part of the Portuguese Empire as it was expanding. Now, the Portuguese hold Cochin, they hold Cannanore. Now, why did Cabral fight with the Zamorians? Why did Cabral fight with the Zamorians? Cabral fought with the Zamorians because he said, you only trade with me and basically, in a way, give me a monopoly over the Calicut trade. This is the reason. Now, when Francisco de Almeida is sent to what we call as Kochi, he reaches in Kochi in 1505. They have already expanded in 1503 in Cochin, and in 1505 they've taken Cannanore. Once Almeida is sent by the Portuguese crown, his mandate is very straightforward. His mandate is that establish Portuguese power and domination in the Arabian Sea. And Therefore, what Almeida introduces is called the Blue Waters policy. It's called the Blue Waters policy. Almeida introduces it. And see, the Blue Waters policy of Almeida is very straightforward. The concept was that any ship in this arc needs to have a permission letter from the Portuguese to trade. Basically, it's also called the Cartas system. What is the Cartas system? Basically, Carta word means letter. It's a letter of permission. Now you see, having come only in 1500, within 5 years of their existence, the Portuguese now want to control all of trade in the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. Basically, if the ship does not have Portuguese cartas, the Portuguese will either seize the ship or sink it. All of this was based on the military might. The Portuguese navy was very strong, and therefore the Portuguese wanted to control everything in this sector. And it is believed that famously, Akbar's mother, Hamida Bano Begum, when she wanted to go to Hajj, the Portuguese intercepted the Mughal ship. And because Akbar is obviously not going to take the permission of the Portuguese, Akbar's mother's ship was turned around to go back to Surat and was not allowed to cross over the Arabian Sea because it had not taken permission from the Portuguese. So you would have multiple Portuguese ships which will be placed in this sector, and these ships would ask you for a cartas. If you don't have a cartas, you buy it. You have to buy it from the Portuguese. You have to buy it from the Portuguese. Akbar did not do anything. Naval power of the Mughals were never very strong. So, Aditya, I'm telling you afterwards. I'm telling you something instant which after later, not right now. I'm giving you an example of the power of the Portuguese in this sea. So the Mughals never needed a very strong navy because Mughal power was territorial. As it is, they were holding a territorial empire. They never needed the navy because they were never expanding overseas. So very simply, the Carta system was the Portuguese way of stopping anyone else from trading, and then basically they used to sell these cartas. It's very simply like a visa. If you don't take this visa from the Portuguese, they will seize or sink your ship. And this is how they were trying to establish a certain sense of power in this area. Does the Carta system make sense? Does the Blue Waters policy make sense? Blue Waters, as it is very deep waters, called Blue Waters. So Blue Waters policy, does it make sense? Have to be more vocal. Have already had your lunch. That energy needs to come out. Okay. See, very simply, 1503 Cochin, 1505 Cananore. As soon as Cananore comes, Portuguese send a governor. Governor is asked to create a mandate, or has been given a mandate to establish power in this whole sector. Power will be established through Almeida's Blue Waters policy. Blue Waters policy is that any ship in this sector will be intercepted. If it has not taken permission from the Portuguese, it has to pay and get the cartas. If not, they will seize the ship or sink it. This was their way of basically undercutting the Arab presence. Now, everybody is on board, and till this point, it is here. Simply means that Portuguese permissions was allowed to navigate. Yes, 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 totally right. Now, though on the ground it is very difficult to do because this Arabian Sea is very big. But the point is it's circumstantial. If the Portuguese intercept you, then you have to, in a way, take the Kartas. Now, if I'm the ruler of Gujarat and if I'm the ruler of Egypt, would I be very, 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 very thrilled to know that the Portuguese are doing this? Obviously, no. Obviously not. That in the meaning that Muhammad Beghara, who's the Muhammad Beghara, I'll write his last name, Beghara, and the Egyptian king obviously would not be happy because they cannot now freely operate their navies in this sector. So the Portuguese, the Gujarat was not under the Mughals. Gujarat was not under the Mughals at this point of time. The Mughals it will only be Humayun then Akbar who will capture Gujarat. It was Mahmud Begara who was actually the one who ruled this area. The point is that if you are any of the powers which surrounds the Arabian Sea, you would not like what the Portuguese are doing. The military might of the Portuguese was good enough that their navy was efficient enough to do this. So what happens is in 1507, the Egyptian king and the Sultan of Gujarat go into an alliance and they attack the Portuguese. And this war is called, or this battle is called the Battle of Chaul. Chaul is near the Maharashtra sector. And what happens is that the Portuguese lose to this alliance. But what is more problematic is Almeida loses his son in the battle. So Francisco de Almeida's son, who was sent as one of the generals on the ship, or the navy general on the ship, he is killed in this war. And now the Portuguese can see that the local powers are not responding in the way they should. So in 1509, Almeida will take revenge for his son and restore Portuguese power back in the Battle of Dew. And this time the Portuguese will be able to defeat the alliance. See, Karthik, 1508 is like a transitional year. In some books, you will find it as 1508, 1507, late 1507 it happens. But the dates basically are 1507 and 8 and 9. But in certain books, you'll find it 1508 also. You don't have to worry about that. They will give you chronological sequence. As it is, Battle of Chaul will happen first, then only Battle of Dew will happen. Yes or no? UPSC never asked this question. Tell us the date of Battle of Chaul, tell us the date of Battle of what we call as Dew. But the sequence will obviously remain Chaul, then Dew. So in certain books, you'll find it 1507. In certain books, you'll find it 1508. It changes. Because the war starts in the late 1508, 1507, spills over into 1508. So it's about who picks the date. Getting my point? So for you, it doesn't really matter. We will go with 7 and 9 because that is more what we call as symmetrical and more correct than 1508. The simple point is, if you will Google it, you will find multiple dates for sure, because it is based on the source which they are using. So my point I'm trying to argue here is Almeida has been given a major mandate, push the power of the Portuguese in this area, that leads to him to become a little bit of an enemy of the what we call as the Egyptians and the Sultan of Gujarat, and that in turn will lead to a moment in which there will be convergence in these two powers, that they will basically kill the son of Almeida, remove the Portuguese power a little bit, but the Portuguese will then retaliate. So what the dates we have done, try to understand. This is how the Portuguese are expanding. They came in 1498. In 1500, Cabral came, fought with the Zamorians. 1501, Vasco da Gama came. 1503, we have Cochin, and 1505 we have what we call as Cananor. 1505 is also Almeida's appointment, and from this point forward, he what we call blue waters policy, and that leads to him to fight with two wars, which is 1507 and 1509. 1507 and 1509, you have Chaul, Battle of Chaul, and Diu. And by 1509, Portuguese are again controlling the seas. Anybody has any issue in understanding this? I'll give you a master timeline. Don't worry. Everything will be written into it. Understand the story in a sequence. Anybody has any issue in this? No, sir. Now, the game-changing moment will come for the Portuguese in India. And that game-changing moment is going to be that in 1510, the next governor, the one who was replaced by a person called Alfonso de Albuquerque. He is going to be the second governor. Alfonso de Albuquerque will negotiate with the Sultan of Bijapur and will be able to take Goa. He'll be able to take Goa. Why Portuguese trying to monopolize the trade even after bitter experience? Because if they monopolize this trade, they can gain a lot of money out of it, because this side, Arabian Sea trade, was very heavy trade. And if you can control the spice trade, then you can control everything. So very simply, 1510 is a game-changing moment because two things happen. Alfonso de Albuquerque comes, and remember his name is not Albuquerque. In Portuguese, Q-U-E means K. So if I had to write my name, it would be something like this, Abhishek. So K is not Albuquerque, it's Albuquerque. So Alfonso de Albuquerque. Alfonso de Albuquerque will be able to wrestle power with the Sultan of Bijapur, and he'll be able to take a very important natural port, which is Goa. So basically by 1510, they had Goa. And Goa is going to now become a major center for the Portuguese to operate in India. Now, one very important thing which you need to understand is Alfonso de Albuquerque, in that sense, is considered very significant in the history of the Portuguese, because he is the one who actually really consolidated the power of the Portuguese. Almeida would have fought two battles, but it's the real power of the Portuguese is under Alfonso de Albuquerque. Albuquerque will also do one more thing. Albuquerque will go and talk to to Krishna Dev Raya. And to Krishna Dev Raya, he will say that the Portuguese can give you the best quality of horses. And the Portuguese will now become the suppliers to the Vijayanagara Empire. And he will basically appoint a person called Ferrar Lewis. He will sit in the Vijayanagara court. And basically you can see the Portuguese presence is increasing. He will also be the one who will make Goa a viable colony. He'll abolish sati in this sector. That was his first task to do. But now Alfonso de Albuquerque argued that the Portuguese need to become a little bit more aggressive in this sector. And that is why after taking Goa in 1510, in 1511, they will take a very important area, which is called the Straits of Malacca. Where are the Straits of Malacca? Where's the Strait of Malacca? Yes. The Straits of Malacca is basically the small sector, small strait between Indonesia. And if you have to go, and I'll show it to you, one second, I'll show it to you. If you have to go to the South China Sea, you have to cross the Straits of Malacca. This is Strait of Malacca. And basically, the Portuguese were able to take Kochi, Cananore, Goa, and then take Straits of Malacca. If you control the Straits of Malacca, you control all trade with the Chinese. All trade with the Chinese, which is extremely significant that way. And the Straits of Malacca will come to them in 1511. They will not stop there. They will wrestle out a sector through which they were actually removed. And Calicut will come to them in 1513. By 1515, they will now go on the other side of the world to control the Hormuz Strait. So you can see controlling straits is something which the Portuguese find interesting and important. But in 1529, when Albuquerque will be replaced by the next governor, his name Nino de Cunha, he will shift the capital from Kochi to Goa. And thereafter, once Goa will become the capital of the Portuguese in 1529, it is only after the liberation in 1962 that Goa will come out of the Portuguese influence. And by 1535, they will also be able to establish their presence near Gujarat in what is called the Battle of, or in the Diu sector. To get the control over Diu, Nino de Cunha had to actually go into an alliance with the next Sultan of Gujarat, his name Bahadur Shah. The point was that first, Bahadur Shah or the Sultan of Gujarat had a conflict with Humayun. So the Sultan of Gujarat went to the Portuguese and said that help me with the conflict with Humayun. I will give you the basin area and the Diu area. Basin is a small area just near Diu. And whilst all of this was happening, the relationship of Sultan of Gujarat will become good with Humayun. And in that context, the Portuguese will say a deal is a deal and they will capture Diu. Ironically, this question came this year. In 2023, the UPSC has now started to ask questions from advent of Europeans quite a lot. Every year there's one question which is there. And the question which came was that from which ruler did the Portuguese take Diu away from in 1535? That I'll give you the exact question next Saturday, when we'll do all previous year questions today or tomorrow together in that sense. But 1535, they were able to take Diu. Now, if you look at it, there's a model and there's a type of pattern which is emerging. The Portuguese don't really want to go inside any country. They just want to create what we call as outposts and control trade. And that is one of the most interesting features about their colonialism. But just to close the story of the Portuguese, see, first is Almeida, then it is Albuquerque, then it is Kunha, and the last one, last major governor, not last but last major governor for us is a person called Souza. Souza. Souza is the one who will allow for the first time missionaries to come to India. And for the first time, a Christian missionary, a Jesuit. Jesuit is basically a Christian, Catholic Christian missionary. Can anybody tell me his name? The first Catholic Christian missionary to land in the Portuguese. Yes. Written like this was a Francis Xavier, Francois Xavier. Xavier. Francis Xavier is going to become the first proper Jesuit to come to India. And he will start to spread Christianity in this sector. Francis Xavier was very popular in this area. But his interesting story is that Xavier always wanted to die in Goa because he loved Goa. However, when he will travel to China, he will die in China. And in China, his grave will be established. But the followers of Francois Xavier will say that he always wanted to be in Goa. So they will dig him up in China and bring him to Goa and re-bury him. For which Xavier is known to be, that's an interesting story, that the old Goa churches which you see were made to commemorate Xavier when he was brought back from China. So he had two graves, one in China and the second one in India, which is still today where he is. Now, basically, this is the model of the Portuguese. Now, before I analyze their colonialism, I want to very simply, yes, a question came on this also. I want to consolidate all these dates in one slide, a timeline which basically gives you the gist, because then I want to analyze the Portuguese colonialism and the problems in it also. Can we discuss all of this on one slide having all the dates for your revision? And this is the only thing which you have to learn here, dates and how it works. That's it. Okay, now just to read this out for you also. See, first governor Almeida followed blue waters policy, complete concentration on trade, didn't interfere in local politics. In the Battle of Chaul, Sultan Muhammad Begara of Gujarat and Egyptian Mamluk fleet fought with him, and Loreco de Almeida, which is the son of Almeida, was killed. Victory for the alliance. In 1509, he will take it back and he will defeat the alliance itself. Thereafter, he will be replaced by Alfonso de Albuquerque, real founder of the Portuguese power in the east, captured Goa in 1510. 1511, he will meet with Krishnadev Raya, and thereafter he will become the main Arab supplier of horses to him, and Friar Louis will be actually established as an ambassador in Vijayanagara. Thereafter, he will also go, after taking Goa, he will go for Malacca, then Calicut, then Homs. He did not interfere in religious matters initially and wanted to remove sati because it was seen as inhumane. And he will talk about association and assimilation. Thereafter, we have Kunha. Kunha was the one who basically was not interested in staying at Kochi. He shifted the capital to Goa. However, Bahadur Shah of Gujarat went into an alliance with the Portuguese to counter Humayun in 1534. However, they had argued that we will give you basin and due in return for that. Bahadur Shah's relationship with the Portuguese became sour when Humayun withdrew from Gujarat itself. But Kunha thereafter tried to increase the power by taking due and basin, but he also went to Bengal from where he was basically thrown out. Now, the last major is Martil Alfonso de Souza. Souza, as I said, is the one who wanted to promote Catholicism and Christianity in India. He will allow a Jesuit, Francis Xavier, to come to India, and he will become the Catholic, basically the first major Catholic priest to come to India with a missionary understanding and with the mandate to convert. He will later die and be buried in China. He will then be brought back to Goa, and that that church is called Bon Jesus Bicicla at Goa. Basically, the Young Jesus Bicicla is church, Young Jesus Church at Goa. The Portuguese in India followed Catholicism. There are two types of Christianity: Catholics and Protestants. Catholics is the orthodox one, Protestants are the liberal ones. So this is Catholic Church. Portuguese were the first to use the cartas, as we know, blue waters policy. They tried to basically control the trade through armed or military power, and they basically wanted to control all Asian merchants. What they used to do was that in order to consolidate trade, all of these factories, friatoras is the Portuguese word for the factories. Basically, these estate factories were established in order to control the seas itself. Now, when you talk about the administration, do not learn this. Do not learn this. This you will not find in any book. This is out of my own research. That basically this is how they used to run one factory or one own sector. They used to have the governor, thereafter secretary, councils, which used to control everything. And under the council, everything was defined, and the people used to be controlled through certain officials. This is the first administrative structure which was established in India, which was not Indian, but was basically Portuguese. Now, the Portuguese coming to India also had a lot of impacts. Most of the things which we eat today were actually introduced by the Portuguese. For example, because the Portuguese had access to Brazil, they will bring in a lot of Latin American products, or Latin American, what we call as crops. For example, aloo, potato, corn, pineapple, all entered into the rural economy. Further, tomato, sweet potato, ladyfinger, tobacco, chili, papaya, sapota, lychee, orange, almonds, groundnut, black pepper, different type, and cashew. The Latin American black pepper was introduced into India. And they also started shipbuilding. That is why Kochi till today is the hub of shipbuilding in India, because the Kochi sector was made into a shipbuilding sector. They were the first to introduce the printing press also into India, so that they could print the Bible in Kannada and Malayalam. And last but not the least is they showed that naval power was important for trade. So now let's consolidate the Portuguese before we talk about the decline. I have a timeline like this also, which gives you the basic dates in that sense. But I want to make it myself. So just to show you this area also, Goa is here, Chaul is here, Diu is here, Basin is here, Kochi, you have a Calicut, Cananore. This is the whole sector. This is the whole sector. You can see they are mostly concentrated on the left hand, what is the western coast rather than the eastern coast. They will have smaller ports, but that will come very late. So let's try to consolidate this sector. Okay. I hope everything is making sense to everyone. This is the story of the Portuguese coming to India and consolidating their rule here. They were the first to come to India. Any issues here generally? Okay. No, sir. Okay. Now see, this is how you revise and this is how you consolidate. This is something which you need to inculcate. If you will be able to make these yourself, my task is done. Thereafter, Malacca, Calicut, Hormuz, Anybody has any issue in what I've written on the screen? This is basically how you consolidate. And for people who think dates are very difficult to remember, there's a trick. There's a trick. If you look at it, there's a pattern which is there. See, 98, there is, I'll write it down on a different screen. See, 1500, 1498, 1501, 1503, 1505, 07, 09, 1510, 1511, then 1513, 1515, 13, 15. Then you see 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2. So if you look at it, there's a, if you can remember this, the years are in sequence. So here it is 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2. If you can remember this. If you can't remember the dates, separate issue altogether. So if you want to remember this there are two ways. Either you remember the sequence, but the way to remember the sequence is remember the gap. You remember one date and then you remember this, and you will never forget. This is a trick of learning dates when they are in sequence. So if you look at it, that the 1498 Vasco da Gama comes, 1490 he gets a good reception from Zamorians. 1500 Cabral comes, but he does not get a good reception. Then Vasco da Gama comes again. Zamorians don't like the presence of the Portuguese, so they move to Kochi, first factory, second factory Cananor. Then Almeida will fight with the alliance of Begara and Egypt. Then he will lose that battle in by 1509. He will win that battle. Goa will come to them in 1510. Malacca, Calicut, Hormuz they will control. Then they will shift the capital in 1529 from Kochi to Goa, and Diu will be captured in 1535. This is basically your basic presence of the Portuguese and their basic, what we call as structure in the way they did it. As you can see, they are only capturing points on the Indian subcontinent and not areas, which I will tell you what is the nature of colonialism. If this is fine, can I now analyze the Portuguese and move to the Dutch? Can I do that? Done? Okay. Okay. Ankit, period of Xavier would be Xavier born, does not matter, came in India in 1535. 1552 he will die. Death of Xavier is in 1552. This is the period of Xavier. Answer Xavier. Sir, from whom Dew was captured? Dew was captured from Gujarat Sultan Bahadur Shah. Dew is captured along with Basin. Captured from Bahadur Shah, Gujarat Sultan. Last word, Basin, Bassein. Sir, are these events in timeline not that important in Main's perspective? See, Pulukunda, that's a good question. See, nobody can ask you to write the history of the Portuguese from start to beginning. Main's perspective would be what is Blue Waters policy. From prelims perspective, this is the questions which are coming. So very simply, the questions which we've seen from this area are mostly in prelims. And therefore, the problem is that even if I give you too much detail, there has been no question on Main's advent of Europeans. Xavier was a Jesuit who was operating in Europe, and Souza called, all governors are not important, only these four. See, there is no end to this. The Portuguese will be there in India till 1962. There's what is important for you is their initial presence and how they've established themselves. They defeated Sultan of Gujarat in 1500 and then captured Dew in 1535 because they defeated that point. But Begara was not that weak that he would have given Dew. So they were defeated on sea, not on land. That is the difference. So can I now move Cunha, Cunha? Can I move to the Dutch now whilst analyzing the Portuguese? Is everybody on board? This is how we will consolidate. This is how we have to consolidate. This is how you consolidate in history, which is timelines. This will change, but even for the national movement, I will give you timelines. Because if you understand timelines, you will never forget anything. It's all the connected history because we tend to see them in separate perspective. They're not separate, they're connected. Okay. Now when we talk about the Portuguese, the question is that if the Portuguese came in 1500, see, Cunha, people call him Cunha. It's not Cunha. NH in what we call as Portuguese language is near, and LH is lear. So whilst I know Portuguese, why not tell you what is the correct pronunciation? Ka is K. So it is written Cunha, but it is Kunya. Getting my point? So I'm pronouncing it in the way it should be pronounced. But that is the spelling. Okay. Now the question which remains is, they came in 1500. They were the first to come to India. But why is that? They never were able to capture India. But they had a head start. The English came to India in 1608. 108 years later. So how is that the Portuguese who were there 100 years before the British ever even touched the land of India, how is that the Portuguese basically were so dumb that they did not even know how to colonize? And herein comes the problem of Portuguese colonialism. See, the Portuguese, their problem is their obsession with controlling trade. These fools, what they were doing is that they were dotting Indian subcontinent. They were taking states of Malacca, they are taking Homas, they're taking here, they're Mozambique. But does colonialism work like this? That you have a whole set of outposts which basically control this sector? No. So the Portuguese never made an effort to meddle into local politics and enter or territorially expand in India. They are that child who is basically not happy, who's happy with the box of the toy rather than the toy itself. They had India, but they were happy to control this sector. They're like, we are controlling trade, bas itna hi chahiye. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. We are going to what are called colonialism through outposts. This was never going to work. This was never going to work. And the flaw to this, you will see, is that the next power which will rise will be the Dutch. And the Dutch will rise in 1600 and destroy the presence of the Portuguese in this sea itself. And when it comes to colonialism, which is basically based on coastlines, even when the Portuguese actually had certain presence in the Mughal court. For example, in Jahangir's court, there were 2-3 Jesuits or the Portuguese saints used to sit. Father Pinheiro was his name. But the Portuguese was so annoying that Jahangir really wanted some breathing space out of them. And that breathing space the English will give. And when the English will show that they can defeat the Portuguese, Jahangir will become very happy. It's not that the Portuguese did not have military power. Their intent was problematic. And the point is that the way Portuguese just remained in and around Goa, Daman and Diu, nobody really cared about them also. And that is why when in 1600, the Dutch will now become important. They will literally destroy the Portuguese empire across the Indian Ocean and take over a lot of these areas, specifically the Straits of Malacca. But when the Dutch will take Straits of Malacca, they will also expand into Indonesia. So very simply, when we talk about the sequence of Portuguese or the European powers to come, the first were the Portuguese. Then come the Dutch, Netherlands. Thereafter, it is the English. Then the Danes. And last but not the least are the useless French. So very simply, the Portuguese had an opportunity. But the Dutch will, within 17th century, I have given you the order. I have write it down also. Now I'm going to give you a very important disclaimer. Very important disclaimer. Listen to me. Some of you will email me or say, sir, this is not the correct order. Because what you will do is you will Google the years of the what we call as East India companies of these countries, and then give me a different list altogether. The East India companies don't matter. What matters is when they have a factory in India. And that is the presence. And this is the order. What is their order of leaving? The Dutch will leave first, then the Danes, then the French, then the English, then the Portuguese. The last to leave are the Portuguese, 1962. So the Dutch in 17th century will rise and realize that conquering and controlling the East Indies, or as we call them, the Indian Ocean, was very profitable. Now, if everybody understands the problem with the Portuguese and the sequence, can I now talk about the Dutch? Can I now talk about the Dutch? Sir, if after English people came the others, then why just we mostly see English, like in independence? Because neither did the Portuguese expand. Dutch were not interested in India, which I'm going to tell you. Danes again were too small and too weak to do it. French were removed by the English. So the English dominated. English were too smart. English were too smart, unlike these other powers. So if you allow me, I'll tell you why the Dutch. What is the Dutch angle? Can I discuss Dutch? Okay. Now, when we talk about the Dutch, see, the Dutch came first to come, last to leave. Yes, the Dutch came, and very simply, they were very quick to destroy Portuguese power in the Indian Ocean. They were very quick to destroy the Portuguese power in the Indian Ocean. When the Dutch were asked by the Portuguese that give us a cartas, the Dutch said that what kind of joke is this? And on the sea itself, the Dutch defeated the Portuguese. So as soon as the Dutch rose in power in the early 17th century, the Portuguese presence started to go away. And in 1602, the Dutch formed what is called as the East India Company, or the Dutch East India Company, which basically in its Dutch spelling was VOC. I'll give you the exact 1 second. I'll give you the full form of VOC and then you will realize VOC. 1 second. Okay, 1 second. I'm copying that because it's a Portuguese word. It's a Dutch word. Yes. I'm pushing it into the message. You can see the word which I've pushed to you is Verinde Ostioche, whatever it is. This is VOC. VOC is basically East India Company, Dutch East India Company. Why am I telling you this? Because if you will see it in the examination, printing press was introduced not by the Dutch but the Portuguese. In the examination, they will never write Dutch East India Company. They'll write VOC. So remember that whenever the examination says VOC, they mean Dutch East India Company. So if you translate that that word which I pushed to you, it will become Dutch East India, or rather East India Company. East India Company. The word as it is the last one is company. So very simply, in 1602, the Dutch will rise with their East India Company and become extremely powerful. But the Dutch saw India, basically how the Portuguese used to operate in India. And by 1605, avoiding this coast, the Dutch straight away went to a place called Mausleypatnam. So rather than concentrating their power, why the name East India? Because this West Indies were the countries near America. These were called the East Indies, which is the Eastern Indias. So East Indies, West Indies, East Indies. That is the way they call it. So that is why the British also called it East India Company. The French also called it French East India Company. They also called it East India Company. There were 3 East India companies in the world, which is the most successful was the English East India Company, but it is also called East India Company. So the Dutch avoided the Portuguese. They said, who will have an awkward conversation with the Portuguese on this coast? So in 1605, they actually established themselves in the Bay of Bengal sector. They further then took another sector which is called Pulicat. You would know Pulicat Lake, 1609. By 1609, they had taken Pulicat also. And by 1616, their first port is going to come, which is Surat in the Arabian Sea. And after having destroyed the power of the Portuguese fully in this sector, by the late 17th century, in 1663, they will establish themselves in Cochin. So you can see that the Dutch diversified themselves. They did not remain in the Arabian Sea itself. They also went into the Bay of Bengal. 2 Bay of Bengal sectors and 2 sectors in initial sectors. I'm not discussing all of their different establishments. These are the first 4. And these are the most important in that sense. However, the Dutch were very happy trading. And they fell in love with the Straits of Malacca. And the Dutch basically conquered Indonesia. Somehow they were not interested in India because they thought that the Portuguese are already there. The Mughal Empire is still not that weak. And for the Dutch, controlling the Strait of Malacca was very important. So the Dutch were not interested in India only. They were interested in Indonesia. And that is why Dutch Indonesian presence or the Indonesian sector went into Dutch colonialism. So you can see that the Portuguese and the Dutch both exist together. But Portuguese don't want to go into India, don't want to expand into India. But the Dutch says that there's too much tension in this area. Rather, let's concentrate in this sector. And therefore, the Dutch were very good in trade, controlled this trade also, destroyed the power of the Portuguese also, but were never interested in India. Now, are you getting how the English, when they will come after the Dutch, India was an open canvas for them? That the Portuguese basically messed up the Indian colonialism angle, and the Dutch were never interested in India only. So when the English will come third, still India was on the table. And therefore, the Dutch in a way allowed the English to expand. And more than that, when the English will come into this picture, the English also wanted to control the Indonesian sector. But in what is called the Aboyne massacre, the Dutch will literally torture the English to death and say that never look towards the Indonesian sector. Literally take out their eyes for being interested in this area. And thereafter, the English realized that we need to concentrate our effort on India rather than going into this Indonesian sector. This is the story which is very, very important, that how is that the third power to come was the power which ruled us, not the first one. Because the Portuguese were dumb, the Dutch were not interested. So the first Dutchman to reach India was a person called Cornelius de Houtman, who came in 1596. But in 1602, their king established what is called the East India Company of Netherlands. They were empowered to carry out war and erect possessions and take territories in this East Indies sector. They arrived in India and they founded their first factory in 1605 in Mauchlypatnam. Thereafter, they also started to establish other ports, but they were threatened and were threatening the Portuguese. And they captured Nagapattinam near Madras from the Portuguese and made it their stronghold in South India. So this, you can see that they rather concentrated on the Bay of Bengal side than on the Arabian Sea side. Now, Mauchlypatnam was their first colony which they established. Thereafter, they will keep on expanding. In 1609, they will take Pulicat. then Surat in 1616, Bichlipattnam in 1641, Karikal in 1645. 1653, they will take even Chinsura and Baranagar, which are in Bengal. And by the time we come to 1663, they will also remove the Portuguese control from the Cochin sector, and they will take what we call as Cochin in 1663. So they will be in Kasim Bazar also. They will be in Nagapatnam also. They will basically, Nagapatnam went from, it was a proper Portuguese sector which was taken away from the Dutch. So the Dutch actually, Mauslipatnam is the old name, Machilipatnam is the new name. That is not the point. The point is Dutch were very active in establishing different points at the whole of Indian sector. Rather than the Portuguese who remained on the Arabian Sea sector, they were concentrating on both sides. Now, when we talk about the VOC, they were very interested in carrying out trade in the Yamuna Valley, in the Central Indian sector. They were as very involved in the opium trade, the rice trade, salt petter, which is needed for gunpowder. And they even conquered Sri Lanka from the Portuguese. Remember, Portuguese used to control Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka will go out of the Dutch hand, from the Portuguese hand, when the Dutch will come. And in 1658, the Dutch will take over Sri Lanka. However, unfortunately, during the later wars, in the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon will fight, the Congress of Vienna, which will happen after Napoleon will be defeated, the French will take it from the Dutch, and then after the English will take it from the French. So that is the sequence of how Sri Lanka went into different hands. First the Portuguese, then the Dutch, then the French, and then the British. But the point is, as you can see, the VOC with this coin was the power which the VOC projected was, it undercut the interest of the Portuguese. Now, before I go to the English, what I want to do, but why only coastal areas? Because coastal ports are from where trade happens. Now, before I go to the English, because I want to give you a break before we go to the English, I want to consolidate Portuguese and Dutch. But is this making sense? Are you understanding the purpose of this discussion? What am I trying to do here? Which is basically tell you how the English captured power. The story I am telling you is how did the English capture power in India. To understand that, I have to explain to you the powers which came. Ceylon means Sri Lanka. I have to discuss what happened before it and after it. And that is basically, as I said, I'm trying to show you a movie. So the first actor which is introduced is Portuguese. Then comes the Dutch, but they don't do anything. Now will come our Phata poster Nikla hero, British, and that is what we have to understand. So now try to understand this. I'm trying to consolidate Portuguese. Why did the Dutch left India? Because firstly, it was too complicated with the Portuguese. Secondly, the Indian subcontinent was still strong, and they were more interested in controlling the Straits of Malacca, where the volume of trade was much higher. And Indonesia is more strategically located for them. That is in a way a miscalculation, but that is what the Dutch wanted. So the Portuguese first to come, but colonialism model was flawed and was based on holding outposts between 1500 and 1602, had a monopoly over Indian Ocean, but did not use it well. On the other hand, the British, they're not the British, Dutch will enter the Indian Ocean in 17th century. They will destroy the power of the Portuguese outposts taken and the Straits of Malacca will be what they wanted. But in this story, Dutch not interested in the Indian sector, but Indonesia. Is this clear? Everyone, come on. Does this make sense? Okay. Whatever I have done till this point, everybody's at the same level with me. This is how you approach this section. Now, when we come back from the break, we go into the most important discussion, which is English. English, how they expanded, initial intervention it is called. That is the most important discussion. Dutch years, you can remember 1602, 1605, 1609 and 1616 and 1663. Dutch, generally the years are not important, but you can remember these ones. I'm more interested in the English right now. I want to transition to the English. Right? Okay. Now I want you to be totally fresh. I want you to be totally active now. So we will meet at what? 3:35. I'm giving you 15 minutes. But you have to promise me that you will be now very attentive. Because I can see the graph going a little bit down. I want you to be attentive. That is going to be very important for us. Because if you understand the English well, their mains questions are also made, prelims questions are also made. Very, very important section we are going to cover now. Promise? Okay. So we'll meet at 3:35 and be ready for a very interesting and important discussion. How the English basically made every ruler of India a fool out of themselves and took India in that regard. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay. Dutch were not interested in the Indian sector, but Indonesia. We will go until 8. We will stop at 5. 5 to 5:30 is going to be our break. And then 5:30 to 8 p.m. That is part C. This is our break period. Okay. No, Yamna, if it shows muted, it's okay. Now, now we transition to the English. Yamya. Yamya, right? Y-A-M-Y, Yamya. Write the pronunciation. Is there any quiz session? You've not learned anything, you want to have a quiz? No. Next week. Now we talk about the English. Now, English is an interesting case. See, the Portuguese and beat the Dutch. Yamya. Sure. The Portuguese and the Dutch. When will we reach 1857 revolt? Abhishek, such an hurry for reaching 1857. Why do you want to reach 1857 so quickly? Abhishek, what's the hurry? We are still in 1600s. Module number 10 is, sir, I already covered 1857. So you already covered till 1857. Module number 10 is 1857, which means after 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks at least. Saturday, Sunday. So there's a long way to go right now. I go chronologically. I always go chronologically. We will cover 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, then reach 1850s, social justice reform, peasant and tribal. I randomly don't jump to any topic. Okay. Portuguese and the Dutch. What is common to them? That in both the crown or the royal patronage was involved in these trading companies or administration, which is that in both Portuguese and the Dutch, kings were funding and supporting the companies. Portuguese, as it is, did not have a company. Portuguese, the king was directly involved. The VOC was basically a public company, government owned. This shows that the kings were very interested in India. So here the crown in both these countries were extremely interested in trade and India as such. However, the English were not like that. The English crown did not bother to do anything. They had no intention to make crown owned company or establish crown owned company and get involved. However, with regards to the English, the merchants were interested and wanted to undercut the Dutch. Basically, the private sector, the private players or individuals were really interested. They knew that there is potential in India. And that is why the first action which happened was that when in 1600 the East India Company, which will rule India, East India Company will be formed as a joint stock company. Now, can I explain to you what does joint stock mean? All the companies are government funded, as the English was joint stock company. Yes. Can I discuss what is a joint stock company? Yes. Now see, joint stock company is very straightforward. See, when you have a government owned company, who gives the initial funding, which is called seed money? Seed money comes from where? Initial funding comes from where? Very good. The government. Further, maintenance and basic running cost is also government. So government owned companies are not profit oriented. They know that if they don't generate a profit, the government is there to fund them. So there's no issue of sustainability. And more than that, they are slow to respond. They're not aggressive because they are not answerable to anyone, answerable to the people, but to the company, to the government. For example, very good example, BSNL, MTNL. MTNL does not need to compete with any of the competitors because they know that if they don't get revenue, the government of India will cover it. So the point is that the government is funding that company. So they don't need to compete. They don't need to be proactive. They don't need to bring in innovation. They don't need to do anything. They can just closely do their work, what they're doing. But the East India Company is different. The East India Company is different because when it came to the initial funding, individuals one second, individuals contributed to create a company in return for shares or stock. So basically, what East India Company was not one individual. It was, for example, 100 to 200 private persons who contribute to give initial money. Now, if that is the case, then the company is answerable to each shareholder. So this share and stock, they're answerable to the shareholder. And do you invest money, this investment, do you invest money only for fun? What do you invest money for? What do you invest money for? You invest money for returns and profit. So the East India Company had to generate dividend. Dividend is nothing but company profit given to shareholders. So if the East India Company does not perform well, what the shareholders will take out the money. So the structure of the East India Company was that there were shareholders. They all can't obviously be the decision-making body. So they nominated the court of directors. They take all decisions on the behalf of the shareholders. And very simply, this means that East India Company is always under pressure to perform. And more than that, the next most important thing was that East India Company did not have any governmental funding. So this means that they have to be aggressive, they have to be profit oriented, and that is why they were always hungry. Now, if I look at the English, and this is going to be the case for the French also, the Portuguese. French I will discuss later, but telling you right now, Portuguese and the Dutch. The difference in their orientation comes from the fact that the East India Company here was a private body. And therefore, it was answerable, it was accountable, and it but this gives you advantage, which is they take quick decisions, they are aggressive, profit oriented. On the other hand, these companies are East India Company are not accountable to the people, so slow to respond and not aggressive in decision making. Are we clear with regards to the nature of the English East India Company? Are we clear with regards to nature of English East India Company? Yes or no? Yes. Now the East India Company said to the Crown, okay, you don't want to pay us anything. Okay, you don't want. Who are those shareholders? Obviously, you'll not learn this list of shareholders. Private people. There are MPs, MLAs, a lot. Most of the shareholders are actually MPs of the parliament itself. But it's private people. You, me, all can be part of the East India Company shareholding. Now, British Crown did not own any percentage in East India Company. No percentage at all. Zero. One second. Huh? No, you don't have to write notes, Sidhu. Don't have to. I am writing notes for you. Indians, I know, Ajay, don't worry. I can hear the background sound before you. That is why I'm stopping. I can hear that. That's happening above us. I'll get that sorted if it becomes a major issue. I know there is a background sound. I am also here with you. So don't worry about that. If there will be something like that, it will persist. I will do something about it. Right now, two basic things. Okay. So I know background sound is there. I am first to hear, then you will hear. Now, as I said, the shareholder, no Indian. Obviously, Indians can't be. It's a British company. Why would the Indians invest? Now, English and the Portuguese, we understand nature. You don't have to write these things down. I'm writing it down for you. I'm making notes for you. Why do you want to write this down? Now, very simply, the Crown had no share. But the East India Company then said to the Crown that, okay, you don't want to give us anything, but at least do one thing. Allow us to have no competition from England. Allow us to have no competition from England. And the Crown agreed. The Crown said that, okay, we will give you a charter, and that charter will give East India Company a monopoly over the trade east of Cape of Good Hope. No British company other than East India Company can operate. So what this basically means is that east of this line, only East India Company can operate. There can be no other British company which will operate. So very simply, if there was a ship which was operating in this sector, it would then have two flags. One, the British Union Jack, and the other, the East India Company flag. And if that is not there, then you can't operate here. I'll give a very simple example. Imagine that the government of India says that only the Tata company can operate in America. No other Indian company can operate in America. Only Tata can. That is exactly what the British East India Company has given or has got from the Crown. It's a royal charter which says that the East India Company can operate as the only British company in this sector. Basically, this will allow the East India Company to compete with the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French, which is that they are the only one who will operate from the English. Try to understand this point. They are trying to eliminate internal competition. Which crown? Obviously, British crown. The point is that they are trying to eliminate internal competition, so that the British in their internal competition would basically allow the Portuguese, Dutch, or the French to actually gain something. So inter-colonial rivalry was allowed, intra-rivalry was not allowed. So now what we have established, is East India Company. East India Company is a joint stock company with a royal charter to operate in the Indian Ocean, Indian and Chinese trade with pressure to generate profit. Whatever I've written on the screen, does anybody have any issue in this? The terms which are written in this screen, anybody has any issue? British East India Company. Anybody has any issue here? Please tell me, because then I start to talk about how did the British expand in India? How were they actually go, or how are they going to actually undercut all the different issues which were there in the Indian subcontinent? I want everybody's yes. Then only we move forward. Yes, no. I want yes from everyone. Yes. Okay. So joint. When you're saying no, you need to tell me what is the point you want me to repeat. In English, East India Company is a joint stock company. It's a private company with a royal charter. Monopoly, Dinesh, was given only for first 10 years. Then it will be given for only 5 years. Then it will be made for infinity. For then 20 years concept is going to come. That I will explain to you. Don't ask me something which I have not taught. Tell me what I've taught, it makes sense or not. What is a joint stock company? Joint stock. People come together to basically give the seed money. Imagine all of us came together and contributed 100 rupees. That 100 rupees will amount to, for example, 10,000. All of you will get a share. That share you will expect return on that 100 rupees. That is what we have created as a joint stock company. The charter has been given to them in 1600. 1600 they've got a charter. If they are trading in spices, they're trading in cloth, they're trading in tea, they're trading in silk, they're trading in multiple things. For the people who wrote no, are we clear? Okay. Now, this charter will be applicable only on British companies, right? Can the government of India stop an American company from not operating in India? It's only given to other British companies. It's not, it's only East India Company will represent Britain, no one else. That is what they're trying to say. Now see, the first English to come to India, he landed in Goa only, was a person called Thomas Stevens. He's again a Jesuit who was roaming around in the Cape of Good Hope area. He lands in Goa. The first proper political interaction between an English and and the Indian ruler is under Akbar. 1590. 1590, Ralph Finch is the person who represented the crown and he met with Akbar. And it is in 1599 that after looking at a lot of the opportunities, John Middlehall will reach through land route. But the point was, all these people were going back and saying that the trade was very good and the Portuguese are monopolizing. So it is in 1599 that a body is created which is called Merchants Adventurers. They will rename themselves as the Governor and the Company of Merchants of London Trading into the East Indies, to bigger name. And then Queen Elizabeth the First will give a charter to not this company, which had been now renamed as East India Company. So now the first charter was only for 15 years. It will be 15 years, then it will become James the One. James First is going to make it forever. But then they will come back to 20 years. So the point is, for 15 years, between 1600 and 1615, only East India Company can operate in India. Now things will become interesting. How things will become interesting? Which is that, see, whilst in 1609, a fresh charter will be given even before 1615 itself, which will give them a monopoly indefinitely. The reason why the English had entered into this area was because of the Dutch. The Dutch and English rivalry at this point of time had become very, very major. And this is this basic rising prominence of the Dutch. See, between 1500 and 1600, nobody really cared. But as soon as the Dutch entered in 1602, now the English wanted India. So it is that impulse that will lead the English to enter into this sector. And when the English will try to go towards Indonesia, we'll have what is called the Aboyana massacre, which is in Indonesia today. Here, the Dutch will literally torture Englishmen to death, along with the Japanese navigators they had in 1623. So one thing was very clear, that the Dutch and English were never going to let each other coexist. And that is why by 1623, it was clear that the Indonesian sector was out of bounds. And that is why the English will now look towards India. But the expansion of the English is very interesting in India, and it is very systematic in that sense. See, we know that 1600 East India Company was established. We also know that the first major interaction was in 1590s and 1599. But the first time a European actually got involved into Indian politics was a person called William Hawkins. William Hawkins in 1608, William Hopkins, Hawkins rather, not Hopkins, Hawkins. He reached the court of Jahangir. He reached the court of Jahangir, and he was extremely excited, very, very excited, to trade with the Mughals. So William Hawkins will reach the court of Jahangir. He was very, very excited that we want to trade with India, and William Hawkins is going to be the first one to interact. However, what will happen is that there's a person called Father Pinheiro. Father Pinheiro. He represents the Portuguese in Jahangir's court. In Jahangir's court. And Jahangir is extremely frustrated by the way the Portuguese operate in India. Specifically that they want to control the trade, they have this obsession with trade, we want to control the trade. Controlling the seas was something which they found very, very annoying. And Jahangir was basically by 1608, 1609 looking for an alternative. He was looking for an alternative that somehow the Portuguese influence goes away. That is why in 1611 and in 1612, the English will defeat the Portuguese at sea, and this will impress Jahangir quite a lot. This will impress Jahangir. That, okay, finally there's a person, or there's a, unfortunately, the English was seen as a people who could, or a power which could counter the Portuguese in India. And based on this, Thomas Roe will be able to get a very major breakthrough in two major years. In 1613 and in 1615, Jahangir will issue farmans. These are called the Jahangir farmans. Farman basically is an order. It's a memorandum order, Government of India notification type. Under the 1613 farman, the English were allowed to establish the first English colony in Surat. How did a private company got military support? They had the support, they had their own navy, and the British East India Company also had one regiment of the British Crown which used to be there. But they had a private army also. The East India Company had a private navy and army. Technology was already available to them. So the East India Company basically had an army and military, or proper military and naval establishment. As it is, and Royal Navy also supported in certain cases. Now this is the breakthrough for the British in India, establishing their first colony, first factory in, or rather we say not first colony, first factory in Surat. First factory in Surat. And thereafter, the 1615 Farman was even more significant because it expanded, it allowed English to trade in Agra, Broch, Mauslipatnam, and Bengal sector. Bengal sector. Basically, Gujarat, Mauslipatnam, Bengal, and Agra, all sectors. Now the English had an order of Jahangir himself that they could trade. So you can see that 1613, Jahangir will issue a farman to build a factory at Surat. And between 1611 and 12, as we see, Captain Best had defeated the Portuguese at near Surat, Swali, and Captain Middleton had defeated the Portuguese near Bombay. So there's a whole story of the Portuguese being dominated by the English, and this impressed Jahangir quite a lot. And that allowed Jahangir to give the first major farman, which is the 1613 farman, which he followed up by the 1615 farman. Now, these two farmans are still nothing to what the British are going to do. Now, I want to tell you one thing very clearly. The British were smart. The British were smart. Basically, the British knew how to appease rulers. The British never ever actually showed their power initially. Jahangir was shown that they were an alternative to the Portuguese, but British always used to go hands tied ki kuch bhi de do, you give us something, we are beggars, we are here to trade, give us something, Bhagwan ke naam pe kuch bhi, give us something. They initially used to appease the ruler quite a lot. That you, the mighty king, I have never seen such a beautiful kingdom, you are the ruler of this world, give us something. And when they got something, then they used to arm twist the same ruler. This is what they did to Jahangir. Jahangir was given multiple gifts. Globe was given, which made Jahangir did not know what to actually do, did not know how happy he was to look at a globe. His name was Jahangir, Jahan Kagir, the one who rules over rules over the world. And he saw the globe and he said, "Acha, I rule over this." Then he was given an hourglass. He was given spectacles. He was given so many gifts that he actually became overwhelmed. Then they also said that you, Jahangir, you mighty person, give us a small area. 1613, he gives Surat. Then they say that we also want to trade a little bit more. So, okay, you get access to this only. But the biggest drama which they did, so 1613, 1615, was in 1632. In 1632, the British reach in peninsular India a Deccan state which is called Golconda. Golconda towards the Bay of Bengal. They reach Golconda. Golconda, you would have heard about it. Berar, Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmednagar. Now, Golconda is a major rural sector in this area. And the British used to trade from this area. From Moslipatam, they used to trade quite a lot. There was a very good volume of trade which was happening. And the British used to operate from this area. 1632 we are talking about. Now, the British now are trading from this area. There's a lot of volume of trade which is going internally. But the problem is that in this sector, the British are paying multiple taxes and custom duty. So basically, if Golconda was divided into 5 parts, every part was taking taxes and custom duties from them. So let's assume that if 2 tons of material was imported, the tax was close to 500 pagodas. Pagodas is the currency of this area. It is a currency which was used by the Vijayanagara state. It's close to 500 pagodas. Basically silver coins, 500 silver coins. So 2 tons they were importing and they were paying 500 pagodas throughout different rulers. So the British went to the Sultan and they said that we are too weak a power. We can't pay to 5 to 6 people. You, the mighty Golconda ruler, who rules the world, I don't know how you rule Golconda. I've also heard that you're very, very handsome. You are the ruler of this world. You are one of the most competent rulers I've ever seen. Such a beautiful palace you have. Please, let's do one thing. As it is, I am paying you 500 pagodas either way. I am paying you 500 pagodas in 200 here, 300 there, 100 there. I'm giving you 500 pagodas. Let's do one thing. I give you 500 pagodas upfront. I pay you 500 pagodas upfront. And just exempt me from trade. Exempt me from any form of further taxation. So basically, what they're saying is that exempt us from internal taxes on an annual payment of 500 pagodas. 500 pagodas. So very simply, think of it like I'm saying to the IT department, income tax department, either way you will take 1 lakh rupees from me as tax. So why wait the whole year? You take 1 lakh rupees from me in the beginning of the year, but then don't tax me every month. So very simply they're saying 500 pagodas right now I'm giving you, which is a big amount that way, but then don't ask me to pay taxes further. Now these dumb rulers, what they don't understand is, yes, they're getting one time 500 pagoda, but that 500 pagodas was contingent on what factor? That 500 pagoda was contingent on what factor? Come on, tell me, what was the factor on which this 500 pagoda was linked to? Very good, Deepika, which is volume of trade. Now, the Golconda ruler gives them what we today call as the Golden Farman of 1632, in which he grants this to the British. But now the problem is that the British, what they do is, from 2 tons, they will increase the import exponentially. So they took this 2 tons to 10 tons. Now, the ruler, who was basically very, very weak in economics, did not understand that this way they would have got 2,500 pagodas. But now at 500 pagodas, the British will misuse this farman to exponentially increase the trade into India from this area itself. This is called the Golden Farman of 1632. What I'm trying to show you here is that how the British appeased these Indian rulers and basically, in a way, made a fool out of them. Golconda ruler did not understand that it is 2 tons on which 500 pagodas is there. The very simple example of this may be, for example, that you are in your college canteen. You go to your college canteen and you say to the person who gives food and who takes money, you say to that person, I eat here every day, and either way, my bill for the whole month comes to 2,000 rupees. But the 2,000 rupees used to come only when you used to have one sandwich every day. Now you say to that person, why do this chick every day of me giving you that 20 rupees or 10 rupees every day? Let's do one thing. You take 2,000 from me right now, but after this, everything which I eat is covered in this 2,000. Now, it sounds to be very, very dumb, and it is dumb, because what you will do is that as soon as he accepts this offer, you will start eating more. You will eat sandwich also. You will eat juice, drink juice also. You will start to have other dishes also, because that 2,000 is fixed. This farman showed that the British had very aggressive intentions and showed to us that the rulers of India basically gave the British India on a flat platter. They never understood what was basically happening. They were clueless. Here that ruler was sitting and counting that pagoda after pagoda, but here the British were now going to basically deprive the state of a major income. And this is where they have started to consolidate on the Bay of Bengal sector. Why didn't they use any bill copy of imports? Aniket, unfortunately, they don't live in the GST era. And even if that is the case, the ruler looks at short-term gain than long-term gain. That is the point. If I tell you, I will give you 1 crore rupees right now, or I will give you 1,000 rupees per month forever, what will you take? What will you take? You will for sure be inclined to take that 1 crore. That you're getting lump sum 1 crore. However, if you actually calculate over your lifetime, that 1,000 rupees would be better. But it is over a lifetime. So short-term interest, myopic, yes, the word is myopic vision. It's a myopic understanding, short-term understanding of these rulers that is leading to these problems. If this is clear, I want to go to the 1639 breakthrough for the British. Do you understand what is the Golden Farman? In the examination, if they ask you what is the Golden Farman linked to Golconda itself, will you be able to explain to the examiner what does the Golden Farman mean? Against the annual payment of 500 pagodas, the British were exempted from internal taxes via the Golden Farman in the Golconda sector in 1632. I'll give you a mains question also in the end to show you whatever question can come. Can I move to the 1639 incident? Okay. After this episode, the next major breakthrough for the British is in 1639. And in the 1639 period, a person called Francis Day, he will go to the ruler of Chandragiri. For how much years they are exempted? Forever. Until unless they give that 500 pagodas every year. Every year you pay 500 pagodas and every year they're exempted. There's no time period in that. Now Francis Day, he goes to the ruler of Chandragiri, which is near Madras. And he goes and says, we have a small trading port in Machilipatnam. Machilipatnam we operate, but it's chota hai. It's small. We the British, we have nothing. We only have the grace of rulers like you who are so powerful. I've met a lot of rulers, but I've never met a ruler like you. If you would be so kind enough, I'm ready to pay a small rent also. But can you give me some area in your kingdom where I can establish a good factory? Chandragiri ruler again is not that smart to understand what the British are doing. And he foolishly gives Madras as a land for establishment of British factory. And the problem with Machilipatnam was that the British were there, the Dutch were also there, and the Portuguese were also there. And in what we call as the Chandragiri Farman, the British now have Madras, where they will build, which is now Chennai, called Chennai basically, where they will build their first fort, which is called Fort St. George, and they will make it the headquarters of East Coast trade. Now you get it, how the British are basically going from door to door begging for something, and the rulers are giving them something. So between 1615, 1613 and 1639, they've increased their presence in Surat, they've increased their presence in Agra, Broch, Machilipatnam, and in the what we call as Bengal sector. Further, they have taken the Golconda sector as more or less a monopoly. And now they also have a very separate, Chennai is a very good port. Chennai port or Madras as one of its most important settlements away from the Portuguese and away from the Dutch. This is where the British were playing a very important role in managing and manipulating the Indian rulers very well. This neither did the French do, neither did the Portuguese do, neither did the Dutch do. These crown-owned companies said, "मैं थोड़ा ना जाऊंगा. I get money from the mighty Portuguese king. You think I will go to this Chandragiri king? Here, they are a private company. They were going door to door. Kuch de do. Give us something. You are a very good ruler. Give us something." You see what was happening. So the English never projected their power initially. Never, ever projected their power initially. They just acted like they were dumb. They were just a deen. They were beggars asking for something. This is the problem with our rulers. They're myopic. They don't understand what they're actually doing. 1513, 1513, 1513, 1515, 1532, 39. Clear, everyone? Because hereafter will come the most biggest blunder which was ever done in Indian history. Yes, sir. Okay. Just to add to it, the English received the Golden Farman from Golconda in 1632. On a payment of 500 pagodas a year, they earned the privilege of trading freely in ports of Golconda. Francis Day obtained Chennai in 1539 because when he was the council minister of Machilipatnam, he went and met with the Chandragiri ruler And by 1640s, they were building their first fort, and this became the headquarters and will remain the headquarters till independence for the Bay of Bengal trade of the British. Now comes the most interesting development between 1650 and 1668 or 1670. What agreement Chandragiri ruler agreed? He just said that we'll pay a nominal rent. We'll pay you whatever you want. You give us Madras. So that is the point. At 5 o'clock, you get a break. Till this point, everybody's with me. No issues. Come on. Okay. Now, in 1651, the British seeked audience to a ruler to a governor. Name was Shah Shuja. Shah Shuja basically is one of the sons of Shah Jahan. Shah Shuja, Aurangzeb, Dara Shikoh were the three major sons of Shah Jahan. He was the governor of Bengal. Now, Bengal at this point of time was very, very, very prosperous. 60% of all trade in India, 70% of all trade of the British used to happen via what we call as Hooghly. Via Hooghly. Bengal was also one of the most prosperous, what we call as provinces. And truly, it was a very, very, very wealthy area. Now, the British wanted something in this area also. And again, Shah Shuja will do a mistake, because in 1651, he will grant a farman to the English that on payment of 3,000 rupiah, which is silver coin, the British could trade freely and duty free in Bengal. Basically, the golden farman, but now not in the context of the Golconda sector, but in the context of what we call as Bengal. Bengal was a major breakthrough. Rupees 3,000 was a major breakthrough. For them, it may have been the most important thing they could have ever done, which is on the payment of 3,000 rupees, which is rupiah, which is silver coins, British could trade freely and duty free in Bengal. Now, this is unprecedented. This is unprecedented because in a way, the volume of trade which the British do from this area is unprecedented. Again, it's a myopic decision and blunder, because again, though it is giving them 3,000 rupiah in one go, 3,000, yes, annually, in one go, the British actually are going to gain too much, because it was again that the volume increased exponentially. So the British were able to do something which is play the same game twice. Golconda 1632, they got Golden Farman, and this is much, much, much bigger than the Golden Farman, which is the 1651 Farman. Shah Shuja was not aware about the data of trade. See, try to understand one thing. Gaurav, ego is something. You think logically because you are not, in the sense that you have things to lose and gain. These governors, these kings are full of themselves. It's like asking today, if I ask, for example, Mukesh Ambani, that just give me 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees a day. For him, it may be not a very big thing. And the type of money which he has, he would not also care. On the other hand, these kings are also full of themselves. They think that I have so much money, myopic, short-term money they have. I am a governor. See, they were trying to show that how good they are. Don't we do it? In India, there could be a moment in which there was a point in which we did not have vaccines to give to our own population. But we were sending vaccines to Africa. Did that make sense? Covishield was not available in India, but was actually being exported to Africa. Why? Why? You tell me why. In multiple periods in which where India is reeling under a lot of issues, and we give financial aid to big countries or small countries. Why? It's all about power. That India wanted to project power. So the Golden Farman is also a projection of power of the Golconda ruler. Shah Shuja is also showing कि तुम क्या लोगे हमसे? जाओ. I exempt everything from you. Try to put yourself in the position of these rulers. They are thinking that there is nothing. See, we know now that the British will rule us. If one white man wearing tights, saying that my ruler is a queen, comes to you and says, give me something, you will give it to that person. And there was a moment in which in Jahangir's court, in Aurangzeb's court, in Mughal court, people used to laugh on the English. कि ये तो ladies rule करती है इनको. That you see how a woman rules these Englishmen. That is the level of condescending tone in which the British were talked about in the Jahangir's court or in the Mughal court. That these white people will do something. They are ruled by women. There's a derogatory way in saying that women cannot rule, but that is the point. So genius ministers will not give against these. There are no genius ministers. Everybody is a patriarch. Everybody is a patriarch. And even if they will, you will humiliate yourself in front of a foreigner. Will you humiliate yourself in front of a foreigner? You tell me. Try to put yourself in their position. They are full of themselves. They are very, very dumb that ways. They are very myopic in their vision. Very myopic in their vision. They are not understanding the implications of what they're actually doing. That is fully true. That is 110% true, because they actually do not understand what they're doing. Nothing at all. They don't understand it. Because for you and me, we know that, okay, they ruled us, they will beat us, they will torture us, 1857 is going to happen. These rulers can't see the future. Getting my point? I'm trying to emphasize this point because this seems like a distant past, or for you and me, we have historical distance. It's called hindsight 2020, hindsight. That we look towards the past and say, acha, this person is a dumb. But I can say he's dumb because I am sitting in 2023. Try to understand that. That is why I say it is Jahangir was the emperor. That is why I say it is very easy to criticize Gandhi. It is very easy to criticize Nehru. It is very easy to criticize the Constituent Assembly. It is very easy to criticize Dr. Ambedkar. It is very easy to criticize anybody in the past. That why didn't he do that? He's the Emperor of India, not area. Jahangir is the Mughal Emperor. Now, why? Because you will say Gandhi, he should have done that. But you know now that what happened. Why did the Constituent Assembly take for first past the post system? Proportional representation was better. But you sit in the chair of the Constituent Assembly and then act the way you should act. So for you, your fundamental rights speak. You take your freedom for granted. They didn't. They had to die for their freedom. They had seen people die for their freedom, and therefore they knew the value of that. So understand this point, that this is a very myopic vision, but we have the luxury of saying that they are myopic. We have the luxury. For them, they are not myopic. They are being grand. Indian, we are showing our power. Get my point? 1651. Why would Shah Shuja give this farman to the English? Yes? Aniket, first things first, our rulers never cared about trading. That is the biggest issue. None of the rulers ever cared about trading. That is why none of these powers actually developed a proper navy. Can I talk about what is going to happen between 51, then Bombay, and then Aurangzeb? I want everybody's assertion, yes or no. Okay. Now, whilst all of this is happening, see, we've gone through 1613, 1615, 1632, 1639, and 1651. Now, whilst all of this is going to happen, in the background, in 1661, because the Spanish conquered the Portuguese in this period, the Portuguese as it is had become very, very weak. Why our traders don't go for search of new markets in spite of depending on Europeans? Again, for that you need political mandate. There was no political mandate. And if you are in India, you are extremely prosperous. You will not go looking around. We never needed anything from the world. We had everything in India. So there's no point going out and looking for anything. That is the basic point. Our rulers mostly concentrate on land, and we already had everything. What can a European sell us? Even today, you tell me what can a European sell us? If it comes to India, what does the European sector actually sell us? They sell us technology right now. Other than that, can they actually sell us anything? Nothing. We produce everything in India. So why would I go and try to find things? Still, we were trading with Southeast Asia. Still, we were trading, but going to Europe was never India's target. Now, in 1661, what happens is that the Portuguese had gone into Spanish domination. It's called the Iberian Union, when Spain captured Portugal. Now, Portugal wanted to come out of its domination. So they took the help of the English. That is the irony of this story. And when the English were able to give Portuguese their autonomy, the Portuguese and the English became good relationship was there. And to celebrate that relationship, there was a marriage which was going to happen between a Portuguese queen named Catherine Braganza. Catherine and the British King Charles II. And now, in order to convince the English that the Portuguese are serious about this marriage and the British also in that sense were not very, Charles was not very keen to marry Catherine Braganza, but he had to. The Portuguese, in their foolishness, give the British Bombay as dowry. Now, basically, what is Mumbai today, Bombay? The name itself tells you it is a Portuguese colony, because Bom means good. Bombay is a very good harbor. So, Bombay means good way. That is the origin of that name. They gave, but the problem was that Bombay was mostly underwater. It's called inundation. It's low lying, but it's a very good fertile area with a very good harbor. Portuguese never were interested in Bombay. They were obsessed with Goa. And therefore, the Portuguese actually gave the British Bombay as a dowry in 1661. Now, the British crown, what would they do with Goa? What would they do with Bombay? So, what they did was that in 1668, East India Company was handed Bombay for a rent of £10. Pay £10 rent every year and keep Bombay. And why is this important? Because what the British do is that, because at Surat again, the Portuguese are also sitting, the Dutch are also sitting. In 1668, the English make Bombay their headquarters of Western trade. So you can see that now they have two independent zones in which they can have headquarters. So on the west coast, they have Bombay, which they will now start to develop, reclaim the land out of the water. That is why as soon as it rains in Bombay or in Mumbai, it goes underwater, because it is actually negative, what we call as above sea level. Certain parts of Bombay are actually reclaimed out of the sea itself. And on the east coast, they had Madras. So you can see that how they're consolidated their position on both sides. Independent zones, Bombay is free of cost in a way, and Madras is nominal rent. So between 1613 and 1651, or rather 1668, the British have very quickly expanded. So after the two defeats of the Portuguese, Jahangir gave concessions to the British by giving them two farmans. 1613 gave them the right to develop Surat as the first factory in India. And in 1615, again, Thomas Roe was able to get permission to trade in Agra, Ahmedabad, Broach, and Moslipatam, along with Bengal. And by 1651, the first British factory in Bengal was established at Hooghly, with a permission to trade for free at a payment of 3,000 rupees per annum. So here, till this point, the British relationship with the Mughals has been very, very lucrative. Just to consolidate, 1613, 1615, 1632, 1639, 1651, 1661, 68. And the story is very simple, straightforward. This gives them access to Surat, this to Agra, to Ahmedabad, to Broach, and to Moslipatam, with certain limited access to Bengal. This gives them access to Golconda, and this is called the Golden Farman. And thereafter, this is 500 pagodas. And thereafter, you have the 1639, you have Chandragiri, Farman, through which they gauge Madras. This is called Shah Shuja Farman, which gives them Bengal for a very nominal cost of rupiah per year. And this is Bombay, how Bombay came to them. Now, can you see a very interesting thing here? The British, by hook and crook, by begging and this and that, are expanding in India. their presence in expanding in India, in interior parts of India, they're also found. Does anybody have any problem till this discussion? Dowry was given to British, then what is the meaning of giving Bombay to East India Company? Dowry was given to the British Crown. East India Company is a private company. The government of India got a dowry from government of America. The government of India gave it to the Tata Corporation. That is what has happened in 1668. 1661, government of America gives it to government of India. 1668, government of India gives it to East India Company or Tata Corporation. Makes sense? Yeah. Is everybody with me? I'll give you a break, don't worry. I'll give you a break early, don't worry about that also. Yes, Queen gave it to the East India Company, yes. Are we clear with regards to this? What is the use of the British government to promote East India Company? Maybe East India Company is the only company which is actually operating in the Indian sector. So give it to whom? Give it to them. And they could see that the British trade was increasing, that the East India Company was actually generating a lot of profit also. Dividend was also very, very good. And most of the British Parliament MPs are actually the shareholders in the East India Company. So they like it. 64 got full access to Bengal. Interior part, yes. Till interior part they got it. Sir, fact overflow. I'll tell you. See, these are not. Abhi, still the story is not complete. I don't want to do it right now. I'll do it after the break, which is that there is going to be another part of the story. What is going to happen between 1680 to 89, and then the Magna Carta of the British in India, which is called the Farooq Siyar Farman. But before that, let me consolidate and then I give you a break. 5 to 5:30, you have break. I'll give you 5-10 minutes before, not an issue. The point is, what I'm trying to argue here is very straightforward. Surat, see, Portuguese expanded. They expanded on nodes, but they never were able to get concessions. So if you actually talk about the facts which we've done since the morning, what are the facts? Let's do one thing. Okay. 1498, 1500, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. Thereafter 1529, 10 rather. 1510, 1511 and 1529 and 1535. This is what you've done. And thereafter what you've done? 1602, 160 the 5, 1609 and 1611 for the Dutch. But I don't even care about the Dutch. You don't worry about the Dutch. Don't remember that. Portuguese are more important to us. And British, what have we done? 1600, 1613, 1615, 1632, 1639, 1651, 1668. This is the only facts you've done, right? So, Vasco da Gama, Cabral, Kochi, Cannanore, Chaul, Dew, Goa, thereafter Calicut, Homers, shift of capital, Dew. Thereafter, East India Company formed, 2 Farmans of Jahangir, Surat, and thereafter everything else. Golden Farman, Chandragiri Farman, Shah Shuja Farman, and Bombay. So, nobody is going to ask you to write these dates. Why am I telling you in this sequence? I will give a master timeline also. Why am I giving you in this sequence? Because there can be a question of chronological order. They can ask you, arrange the following events in chronological order. Is there any trade agreement between East India Company and Mughals? No. Mughals don't trade. They're kings. They don't trade. The local rulers, the local traders trade, but there's no agreement. The Mughal, Jahangir Farmans are the two which give them access to trade. It's all concessions. It's not treaties. It's all concessions, which shows that the Mughals have higher power than the East India Company. That is the point. Chronological order questions matter, in which they can ask you which is first. Chandragiri is first, or Golden Farman is first, or the Shah Shuja Farman is first. And more than that, there can be a mains question which can be coming from this area. And I'll give you a glimpse of that question. That the early expansion of the British in India was not planned but based on concessions which allowed them to create routes into the Indian subcontinent. Now, in that type of question, you would have to give the dates. That is the type of question which will come. I'll give you that question in the end. But that type of question is asking you, how did the British actually expand in India initially, and how it was not based on a planned model. It's not that everybody, the British went and said, hands up, give me your king. No, no, no. It was all based on the concept of how you get concessions. So British actually were lucky in multiple places. And I will show you when we'll meet next time that the British were actually, British patiently waited. The Marathas gave them the empire on a plate. The Mysorean sector, the same thing happened. In Carnatic, the same thing happened. Sikh, same thing happened. They chup chap, they stand in the corner. They stood in the corner and saw us destroy ourselves. And when they saw that the right time had come, they just intervened. That is the story of British expansion in India. And this is the early intervention where British are showing a certain type of proactiveness. Try to understand this point. They are showing a certain type of proactiveness which basically wasn't there by the Portuguese or the Dutch. They came, they traded, they went. They want more. If this is clear, I'll give you a break here. We can meet at 5:30 and then we can talk about the last part, which is understanding the English Farrukhsiyar Farman, then the Danes, 10 minutes discussion, French, and then the successor states and rebel states, and end the class for today. If you say clear, then I'll end the session here and we can come back. Yes? Clear. Okay. So I see you at 5:30, and when we come back, we take these stories forward. Now, yes, new link, part C you will join. See you.